Hi, my name is Trevor Sullivan, a Microsoft MVP for Windows PowerShell, and I'm also an independent cloud and automation consultant. I wanted to take a few minutes today to show you how to take your existing PowerShell scripts and import them into Visual Studio so that you can manage them through a Visual Studio PowerShell Tools project. Now, I have another video out there that already talks about the PowerShell Tools extension for Visual Studio, but in this case, I'm specifically going to be talking about taking just a bunch of script files that doesn't have a Visual Studio project file associated with it and basically create a solution around that. So what we're going to do is start by going out to GitHub, and we're going to create a new repository. And we're basically just going to call this PS test, give it a description, and then we're going to initialize a README file. We're basically just going to add a couple of files to the repository, right? And so these could be PowerShell script files, they could be XML documentation files, they could be pretty much any type of file. So in this case, we just have a README markdown file that contains the documentation for GitHub, and we've also got the license file that contains the actual license text. So we're going to go grab the git cloning URL over here, and we're going to switch back to Visual Studio, and we're going to clone that repository into our repos directory. So that's going to go ahead and download that into the local file system here. But what you're not going to see is you're not going to see anything show up in your Solution Explorer. Nothing's going to show up in your Team Explorer, and so on. So you might wonder, well, how do I import these files that are in my Git repository and add them to my PowerShell project? Well, we don't have a PowerShell Tools project at this point. So assuming that you've already watched my other video that talks about PowerShell Tools and you've already installed that extension, you can come up to Visual Studio's new project, and then we're going to choose the PowerShell category here, PowerShell language, and then we're going to choose to create a new PowerShell script project. So in this case, we're going to say that we just have a bunch of PowerShell scripts. They do a bunch of different random things. They're not really any part of a common set of functionality. So we don't want to necessarily create a module project. We just want to create a project to manage all these individual script files that kind of do their own separate things. So I'm going to call the project my cool project. And I'm actually going to browse into here and go to my PS test folder. And as you can see, I've got that hidden .git file, which basically means that this is a valid Git repository. And I'm going to choose to put it into that folder. Now, you also want to uncheck the create directory for solution, because what happens is Visual Studio actually has a solution file. And inside that solution file, you can have one or more projects, and each project can be a different type. So you could actually have an entire Visual Studio solution that only has a single PowerShell project in it, or you could have a Visual Studio solution that has a PowerShell project, a Python project, a C# console application project, and these components can all make up part of an overarching solution. So in this case, we're not going to create a separate directory for the solution. And what would happen there if we checked that is it would put the solution file in the root of our project directory, and then it would actually create a subfolder for each of the projects that we then add to that solution. So what we're going to do is just leave that unchecked so that it doesn't create that folder structure, right? So now if we go out to Windows Explorer and take a look at this project, we're going to see that it created the My Cool Project Visual Studio project. And what we're going to do is we're basically just going to grab all these files here, and we're going to move them up to the root. So we're actually going to close the solution, and then we're going to move those up to the root here. So everything is now in the root of that project, and we're just going to delete that subfolder. So now I've got my Visual Studio solution file. Again, that's that overarching control file that contains all the projects inside our solution. And then the PSS proj file, that's the actual PowerShell Tools project that's going to track all of our PowerShell files that make up our project. So let's just go ahead and copy as path, and then just open the solution file. And so if we head over to the Solution Explorer, you can see we now have the Visual Studio solution there, and we have a single project, which is a PowerShell project, inside of that solution. It also gave us a default script file. It just contains empty text, right? But now what we want to do is we want to take those existing files, right? Again, they could be markdown files, license files, script files, pretty much any supporting file, and we want to add those existing files to our project. So what we're going to do is right-click on the PowerShell project, say Add Existing Item, and then we're going to go in here and grab that license and readme.txt files or any other PowerShell script files, PS1 files, anything else, XML files, JSON files, and you can just add those to your project. And so now what we can do is come back into our Team Explorer here, go to our repository here, and we can go to the Changes tab, and we can actually add all these files to be tracked by Git, right? So right now these files are not being tracked by Git, but if we right-click them and select Add, it's going to add tracking for those files to our project. So let's just go ahead and type a message here that says initial commit. We'll commit that. Do I want to save the solution file and the project file? Yes, we do. And then once we make that commit, or we create that initial change set, we then want to synchronize that with our Git repository. So as you can see, that worked successfully, I think. Oh, no. So there's outgoing commits, just one commit. And now it says successfully synchronized incoming and outgoing commits. So if we head back over to our Git repository and just do a little refresh here, you can now see that we've got all of our supporting project files. We've got the solution file, we've got the PSS proj file, which is our PowerShell project specifically inside that solution. We've got our README file, our license file, and our script file that's empty. So basically, this is how you take existing code that's not part of a Visual Studio project. You basically synchronize that into a local Git repository from wherever your remote repository is. It could be GitHub, it could be Visual Studio Online, it could be Bitbucket, or any other Git hosting service. We synchronize that Git repository with our local file system. We create a new Visual Studio solution, and then we add those existing items to the PowerShell project inside that solution. And then we commit, and then we synchronize that back up to make sure everything's kosher. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, my name is Trevor Sullivan, a Microsoft MVP for Windows PowerShell. You can find me on Twitter at PCGeek86, and you can also go to my website at trevorsullivan.net, which just went through a major redesign yesterday, August 11th. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you soon. Cheers.